cluttered garage. I'm really glad you're here. A place where we can laugh and talk and days are filled with cheer. The clouds and sun may come and go, but one thing's always clear. Welcome back, my friend. You know I'm really glad you're here. Yeah.
Hey, welcome back, my friends. I am really glad you're here for sure. Welcome to live stream number 222. It's not December 25th. Oh my goodness. It's December 15th. Well, I messed that one up already, didn't I? Well, it's December 15th. It's going to be the 25th. It's right around the corner. Christmas Day coming up. There we go. December 15th, 2025. Welcome. Welcome. I am indeed really glad you're here. If you are new to the channel, if this is your first live stream, know that the channel is about tractors and tractor attachments and DIY projects and outdoors and life in the country, the rural lifestyle. So what in the world are we talking about grief and death tonight for? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because our guest that's going to come on here briefly is someone that I met through social media, through TikTok, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But I think that the topic is one that is timely because the holidays are a time that are difficult for a lot of people, whether it's due to grief or loss or anything. But it can be a difficult time. As far as loss, we all experience it. So I think it's something we can all relate to. And I want us to be able to talk openly. And I love to talk to interesting people about interesting topics. And if you just came here to talk about tractors, I understand that. But this is something that I think is important and timely. So if you are here for the first time, please say hi in the live chat. And let me know how you found the channel. Was it on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok? Let me know how you found the channel. And we'll be on here tonight until 8 p.m. Eastern time. So we do this every Monday for just about 1 hour, and it's just a fun little time to get together. Now, here's the thing about going forward. I am going to probably not have a live stream next week or the following. This is going to be the last one until the new year. Last year, I took a break from the live streams right about this time as well, and we're going to do that again. So this is our holiday live stream. Happy holidays! Let's talk about grief. Anyway, so keep in touch. You can email whatever that is, but whatever you want to do, we will keep in touch, and I'll keep putting out videos as well. So I don't know why my titles are not showing up for some reason. So I don't know if there's a glitch with the camera, with the equipment here. What's going on? I don't know. I hope I'm able to bring Eric on the stage. Yeah, I'm having a hard time here. Nothing seems to be working. Isn't that weird? It's my mouse. All right, I can use my trackpad. All right, so Eric the Undertaker is going to be joining us in just a moment. I found Eric's channel on TikTok, and you know how the algorithm just shows you things. And apparently, I must have watched one of his videos. And if you stay in the video for more than 5 seconds, then the algorithm feeds you more and says, "Oh, you must like this. You watched it for more than 5 seconds." And I did. I liked it, and then it kept feeding me more videos from Eric the Undertaker, and I really enjoyed watching his content because he talks about not only the business of being an undertaker, but also the grief side of it and the counseling side of it, and dealing with families, dealing with loss, and that really struck me as something that we can all relate to. So I reached out to Eric a couple months ago and said, "Hey, do you want to join me for a live stream?" And he said, "I'd love to do that." And then we set it up for this holiday season. So uh, if you have any questions, make sure that you post them in the live chat because this is an interactive live stream. So if you have any questions, post them in the live chat with the word question followed by your question. And hopefully we'll be able to pick those out and have a little conversation about that. So we are going to bring in Eric the Undertaker, but first, I want you to watch this little intro so you'll see what I'm talking about.
Hey kids, I'm Eric the Undertaker, and this is for any of you kids that want to understand what happens when we die, and for the grown-ups that love them. Here's a question. Have you ever lit a candle not for its light, but for the person who should have been standing beside it?
Hi, I'm Eric the Undertaker, licensed funeral director and embalmer for over 27 years, and here's your porch talk for today.
What's something that you held on to after losing someone you love? Have you ever seen somebody grieve so loudly that it made the whole room stop? Have you ever wished that you could hold on to someone forever? Even so much that the word goodbye felt impossible. Here's another 15-second grief tip. Grief doesn't just affect your heart. It shows up in your body too. Fatigue, aches, even brain fog. Be gentle to yourself.
Eric, how are you this evening?
I am great. Thank you. And what an incredible introduction. I really appreciate you putting that together.
Well, it's just you. It's just who you are. And thank you. Thank you for joining me tonight. I really do appreciate it. I know you're a really busy person. But as I mentioned before you came on, I think this is a topic that is timely. I think that regardless of what our jobs are, what our lives are, it's something we all relate to. And I love that your TikTok channel, which we're going to talk about momentarily, that you approach this from what I think is a pretty different perspective. Yes, your career is Undertaker, but you really touch on the personal side of things and what you've seen working with families and people. So that's what struck me, and that's why I reached out to you. And again, thank you for joining me this evening.
Yeah, it's an incredible honor. And it's funny, the different connections we make in the social media world. And I had no hesitation whatsoever when you reached out, as being on two ends of the probably spectrum when it comes to social media content. You're exactly right. We all end up meeting in the middle with certain things, and grief is definitely one of those things. And especially during Christmas, during the holidays, as we approach and try to navigate those days that are kind of dictated by the calendar. Well, sometimes when we're grieving, our heart really doesn't agree to the calendar, but it's going to happen anyway. So here we are.
So true. And not only are we on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to content, we're at opposite ends of the country. I'm on the East Coast, you're on the West Coast. So we're far apart physically as well. but
we make it work.
Not so far content-wise, because I reached out to you. You told me that this wasn't much of a stretch because you grew up on a farm. Is that right?
I did. I grew up on a corn and wheat farm in Northeast Colorado. And in fact, I shared with you when you said, well, my content's mostly about tractors and, farming and homesteading. And I said, no problem. I literally, my grandpa duct taped 2x4s to my boot so I could reach the clutch of the John Deere when I was really way too young to be on it. But somebody needed to do it, and he figured out a way, and off I went. So live far from the farm now. We have a small, much smaller property now that we eventually moved to, my wife and I, so the kids have room to roam, but it's a long way from the farm now, but still have family and have nothing but respect, for that life.
That's great. Now, is the Undertaker business something that is generational, or is it something new? What I see here, the folks that I know in that business, it is generational. It's their parents, their grandparents. So I don't know if it's a a business that people get into today, or if it is just something that you're kind of born into.
Yeah. I think it can happen, definitely happen either way, but I think less and less is it kind of a legacy business where it's passed down.
Really?
There's definitely still those out there, and I have no connection whatsoever. Excuse
Interesting.
this, clearing my throat. I apologize, but yeah, the closest thing I have is that same grandfather that duct taped, the 2x4s, to my boot when I was probably 6, 7 years old. When I was maybe 10, 11, plopped down the tailgate of the Ford pickup and had a conversation with me, and he said, "Eric, I'm going to tell you something you're going to be surprised by, but when you grow up, there's some things I want you to remember. First of all, whatever you do in life, don't farm." And this was a time when the ag economy was slowly starting to tank, and it's a difficult life. And for whatever reason why he told me that then, I don't know, because he spent his entire life doing it, and my father coming and his family coming up after him. But and then he goes, "And I'm going to tell you, I want you to focus on doing something that not a lot of other people want to do." So it's interesting that I ended up doing something that there's not a lot of us that it's not necessarily want to do, but really are built to do. And I firmly believe that we all are truly built to do something. And if we are blessed enough to actually end up there and thrive and be passionate about that industry, and then we can, serve a community and serve, in my case, other families, then it's really an incredible blessing.
That's great. And, candidly, there are likely people watching who see the word or hear the word Undertaker and think, "Ooh, that's kind of creepy." But, you're doing the necessary work. I mean, it's a fact of life, and you're not only doing the necessary work, but again, you're connecting with people on a very human level, which I think I guess it kind of comes with the territory, that you see people grieving all the time. But again, you're doing the necessary work, but you're doing it in a very, very loving way from what I see.
Yeah, which really is why I mean Undertaker is probably the oldest, unless you go back to the Egyptian days, the oldest term out there describing what I do. But I've kind of embraced it because I truly think that's what we do. We have the honor of undertaking so much of the burden from a family when they're going through a loss. And I've just never lost sight of that really truly is our goal when a family comes into our care, that we're going to do our best to undertake as much as we can from them during that process.
Well, listen, if you're just joining us tonight, I'm speaking with Eric, the Undertaker, who also happens to have a TikTok channel. But if you do have questions about grief and about if you have anything you want to share, post it in the live chat. This is an interactive live chat. If you have a question, post it like this with the word question followed by your question, and we will try and pick that out if we can. So you've been in this business now for 27 years, what I've seen on your videos, and you're going to have to change that to 28 years soon.
Yeah, I know it happened so quickly.
Right. So when did you start thinking about social media and about sharing, that, you share some of the business end, but you also share this grief end. So
Yeah.
how did that evolve?
It's interesting because my wife and I, who's my partner in this and on our lives, she's often the one that comes, or she'll help moderate and actually ask the questions, which is helpful, and people love to hear that. But we were having this conversation just the other night about kind of the growth of where we are. And many, many years ago, my wife comes from a corporate influencer and social media marketing background, before she became full-time, not only with our business, but as a mom. And, I approached her years ago and I said, I really think that, social media is going to be something that we need to take a look at as far as marketing the business. And she told me then, and she told me just the other night when we were talking, she says, Eric, that's such a subtle line. I mean, how do you think you're ever going to be able to cross over into that? that, social media, people are scrolling through and want to see something from a funeral home. And I still, Ed, kind of agree to a lot of that, which is kind of, where we ended up landing, because I, currently, and we do have social media accounts for our funeral homes, and we post community events and different things that we're doing at the funeral home. But to actually get down to the specifics about what I truly want to share, and that's really lessons that I've learned, not only just on grief, but really lessons that have taught me probably more about life than anything else from the living world, but learned it from death. And to be able to share those stories specifically. And there's a lot of other funeral professional content out there, and a lot of them kind of go behind the scenes or focus on that. But I really wanted to focus more, less on the business side, which we do talk, and more about the experience side and my journey, kind of weaving in and out of all these families that we've had the honor of serving. And, not only what they've learned, but probably more importantly, what I've learned from those experiences, and from the death that we're dealing with, and even the story of the life that preceded it. So that's where we landed. And it's, my wife kind of smiles and says, you did it. You found a way to actually do it. Although it doesn't kind of go directly back to our business, more of me as an individual and us as a family, and just how we're navigating life, which is totally fine, because I think the less marketing to social media, the more people feel comfortable sitting down, pulling up a chair, in our case, the porch, and having a conversation.
Yeah, I love your porch talks. And if I were, maybe a professional psychiatrist or something, I would guess that this social media aspect really fulfills something else inside of you as well. You're not using this as a tool to drum up business for your funeral homes. I think there's something inside of you that gets fulfilled by sharing this with people. Am I right about that?
Yeah. And I shared this. I don't know, were eavesdropping on our private subscriber live last night, Ed?
No, I
Because
was not.
we were talking directly about that. And I remind people all the time that, listen, I'm learning from followers and people that join our lives and comments that are made. I'm learning and gaining just as much from you. You and I have something else in common, Ed, that, having lost a daughter. Well, 5 years ago, we lost our oldest son after an epileptic seizure. And I tell you what, as much as I thought I was prepared, and I thought I was a professional and an expert when it came to death, dying, and the grief process, everything went out the window when that happened. And because it brings you to your knees. And what I have found is that not only sharing what I know and I have gained in knowledge and learned academically, professionally with other people, what I get back from them has probably helped me more on my grief journey than anything else. So it's definitely a two-way street.
Hey, selfishly, I invited you on here tonight because we're dealing with grief in our own home. And I thought, it's going to help me, but I also want to share that with others. And I think you and I share that same feeling of what I feel inside. If I can put that out there and help others, then that helps heal me as well. Let me say, I'm so sorry to hear about your son. I did not know that story, and I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. And I mean, you answered one of my primary questions I had for you today. I really don't have any questions for you, but the one question I was going to ask was exactly that with all the experience you have, has anything rocked your world? And obviously, that's it.
Nothing more than that phone call. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, so I think that sometimes we think that people in your business might be so immersed in the business of death and dying that it must not affect you the same when it happens in your own life. But that's obviously not the case. We all.
Yeah. And it's just very different. You know, you need no matter how much you're prepared for it. So, and I think that's for everybody. And you know, whether or not their profession, their expertise is death and dying or anything else, you know, when it ultimately happens to you, it's just a completely, you know, it's a completely different thing.
Yeah. And I want to talk about the grief part of it a little bit more as we go forward. Uh, Back to a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the business here. Our friend Chris has a question about the business itself. And, you know, I was thinking about you earlier, and I thought what's so neat about what you're doing, your industry, is that you're like a doctor, but also like a counselor and a therapist at the same time. I mean, there are compassionate doctors out there, but obviously you're in a very scientific field, but you're also in a very uh, human field as well. So the question was about the what your, I guess what your training is. Is there a degree program at, like?
Yeah, let's talk about that. It's going to vary somewhat, you know, from state to state, but in general, most of the time, the prerequisite to go to mortuary science college, first of all, which is going to be an interesting thing because some people don't even realize that exists. But the prerequisite is going to be the equivalent of an associate or a bachelor's degree. And then mortuary science college is generally a 2 to 3 year program, academic program. And then there's a 1 to 2 year internship, sometimes called an apprenticeship after that, to obtain dual license. Some people choose to just get a funeral director's license. Some choose to just the more scientific side, what I refer to as backroom, the embalmer's license. Some choose to be dual license, which I am. And that, you know, constitutes, you know, what a kind of full-blown mortician is then. So, but yes, incredible different hat. I mean, I wear so many hats on a daily basis. And honestly, it's probably one of the things that keeps me passionate and interested, you know, about it, because you really never have the opportunity to get bored. And just when you think you've got your day scheduled and you've got everything lined up, the phone rings and takes you a completely, you know, different direction. So, and families, you know, sometimes they just want to do business and they want to accomplish exactly what they have to. And then there's sometimes that families walk in the door and they are literally and figuratively going to need their hand held throughout the whole process. And both of those are perfectly fine. But you've got, and I tell my staff this all the time, you've got to be a little bit of a chameleon and be able to adapt to those. And the most important thing that we can do, first of all, to be able to respond to that is just listen. You know, sit down and listen to people. They're going to tell you exactly what their needs truly are.
That's great. And I see some folks on here from your TikTok channel. So welcome. Looks like Tracy here from your channel. And
yeah, we
I know
have some wonderful, what we call porchketeers, and they are incredible. They are incredible source of support and, you know, wonderful supporters. You know how that is, Ed.
That's great. And I know that you're starting to put some content on YouTube, kind of crossing the social media platforms and growing on there as well.
And we are. I'm surprised at how different it is. So I'm watching your channel to learn as well. But it gives us opportunity to create different content and to expand, you know, on kind of what we're doing. And we have many people that share our content from TikTok, which is where we started. Just January 2nd of this year is really when we started. Wow. You know, they'll share to other people, but those people don't have TikTok. So that's why I think ultimately you're kind of forced to add different, you know, platforms so you're more accessible to other people. So,
right. Well, like I said earlier, for whatever reason, the algorithm showed me one of your videos, and I apparently watched it for too long, because then it kept showing me more videos, and I kept watching those too. So you're in my feed now, and
yeah.
I actually look forward to seeing them. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have sometimes people, and we mentioned this as well, because the algorithm gets a little scary sometimes, or you can either look at it as scary, or sometimes it's divinely divine intervention of some sort, because people that show up, you know, sometimes in our feed and our lives that literally just hours before lost someone.
Wow.
And not only is it, you know, are we incredibly grateful that maybe we can give just a little bit of, help, and they can find value in what we're saying. But even more importantly is the community we're building, because as soon as people recognize somebody's had a loss, the people just start to love on them and reach out to them, not only, on screen, but offline, and, be able to support and help in any way they can. So that truly is the motivation from you to build the community we're trying to. So.
Yeah. So let's talk about the holidays a little bit, because I mean, loss is difficult anytime, but the holidays are historically difficult for people. Uh, Not necessarily just because of loss. The holidays are difficult, I guess, because it's sometimes this false vision of everything's happy, everything's great. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's not the case for some people, and it is a wonderful time of the year, and I'm thankful for that. But I also recognize that there are people out there that are hurting for all types of reasons. But obviously, we're talking about loss tonight, and in our case, losing Lizzie on December 20th. We're coming up on that date just 5 days from now, and it's what I found through the years is that it's that first year. You go through that year of firsts, first
All those first.
birthday, first holiday, first Christmas. That for whatever reason, those firsts are really the most difficult, I think. And for some, it's only marginally better for the second, third, fourth, but that first one is really difficult. And I watched one of your videos where you talked about a family and what they did with the dad's empty chair for that
Yeah.
first Thanksgiving. And maybe you can briefly tell that story to our folks watching.
Yeah, we had we had a family that lost their father just really a couple of weeks before Christmas. So, and they were so grounded in tradition, and I think, being the husband and father, he kind of drove a lot of that tradition. Everything from, and oftentimes I think, families don't even realize, that things are their traditions. It's just what happens, during, Thanksgiving, during Christmas or other holidays,
It's not a
important
tradition. It's
family
just what we
events.
do every year,
That's
right?
just what we do.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden that person's not there. And who's going to do it? And do we even do it? Do we even acknowledge it? And I had a family that exact situation happened. And the father did everything from, carving the meat at dinner to, he would always play a song. He played guitar and, different things that once he passed away, that the family really didn't even realize was part of their tradition. And the majority of the family, when I sat down and met with them, they're like, well, we don't even think we're going to do Christmas this year. We don't even know if it's going to be to our benefit to even acknowledge it. And it was one of the younger daughters, 12, 13 years old. And she basically said, yeah, absolutely we are, because my dad would not want it any other way. And it's interesting because and now kind of with a new stream of information I'm providing about kids and kind of their specific journey and death. But oftentimes kids remind us of that, because kids don't have the filters that we adults do. And they see things sometimes we don't see, and they'll say things certainly that really should be said, but a lot of adults, don't step up and say because they may think it's not appropriate at the time.
That's right.
Or trying to be sensitive to it. Well, kids sometimes aren't too sensitive, and it can actually be a benefit. And the long or the short of it is that I got a text message on Christmas Eve. A lot of their traditions were specific to Christmas Eve. And I got a text message late that night from that family with a picture of their husband's and father's chair. And they had, his cooking apron they had laid over. They had lit a candle there, and his guitar was propped up And some of the handwritten recipes that he used during the holidays were right there, on either side of his plate. They had a setting, place setting for him, and they chose to go ahead and not only acknowledge it, but to embrace it. And I don't even want to call it what they did memorialize it, because that can kind of put it a little bit on a pedestal that's not touchable. But what they did was completely tangible, to the point that the family could actually be involved in it. They could sit in the chair, they could sit around it, and everybody knew he wasn't there. But what they wanted to acknowledge was that the influence that he had on that family, and the simple fact that that table, that celebration, in this case, Christmas, and even the celebration of his life wouldn't exist if he hadn't. So, and I do want to set that aside just for a moment, though, because oftentimes I think people say that well, we have to acknowledge those traditions. And if there's, a couple of little nuggets of advice I can give today, if you're going through your own journey through this holiday season, is you don't have to acknowledge the traditions if they're going to be hurtful for you. It's okay to set them aside. It's okay to bench them for a year or 2 years, or it's okay to change them and to, make them evolve and into something else that still honors your loved one, but makes it, your own. Because the truth of the matter is, every individual that's surviving and the family as a whole has changed and will change forever.
That's a great point. It really is, that you can make new traditions that, there's no real rules. It's whatever works for you. But I think you have to look at what your heart is telling you, and that's always the difficult part of life. And anytime I have an opportunity to try to pretend that I'm this wise man, I always tell people, be honest with yourself. I try to tell that to our children, and I remember sharing that with our Elizabeth, who had her own struggles, and I said, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to tell yourself, what do you really want? Who do you want to be? And it's in there. It's always in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's great to, like you said, acknowledge the person, but follow your heart. I think a lot of times I know that a lot of times people are afraid to express joy after they lost somebody. They're afraid to smile or laugh. They feel like somehow it's an insult to your loved one if you laugh at a joke, or if you feel joy. And I've had what I consider a fair amount of loss in my life. But I was thinking earlier that I think we all go through only a handful of really heart-wrenching loss. We lose grandparents and aunts and uncles and friends, but when you lose people that are really close to you, like my mother died when I was 24 years old. That hit really hard. I lost a best friend when I was in my 30s that was sudden, and that hit really hard. So I've had a lot of loss that way. But I think for me, it certainly grows you as a person. You don't ever want anybody to experience loss, but gosh, I think I can't help but think it brought some more empathy on my part, having lived through some pretty hard times. And I have this saying that I think of often, is that adversity builds altruism. And I think that for me, that's been the case, that I tend to relate to people, and I guess it's the empathy part. I don't know if I would have had that had I not experienced a decent amount of loss in my life, and not more than anybody else has had. We've all had it. But yeah, I was just thinking about the part that you're allowed to laugh, you're allowed to feel joy, and don't feel guilty when something makes you chuckle, or it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often tell, people that grief really is the echo of love. And if that, and it can be deafening at first, and definitely during the holidays it can be incredibly deafening, but ultimately, that echo is going to sing to you. And if that singing causes you to smile or laugh or embrace a new joy in your life, that is perfectly fine, and it really is good growth when it comes to your own grief journey.
That's so true. And I'll go back to the loss of my mother, because again, I was 24 years old, so she was the first adult loss I think that I experienced. I had lost my favorite uncle when I was 9 years old, and it was devastating. But it wasn't until my mother died, and again, being 24, I think that was the first time I lost someone as an adult myself, and that really hurt. And when you talked about the empty chair with the father, I remember these feelings of pain when I lost my mother, and I had this thought of, oh, it's not what's missing, it's what remains that hurts so much. That you
Mhm.
see something that was hers, and we see that with Elizabeth. You come across little things that were hers, little, she wrote a card to us just a month before she died, which she didn't know that was going to happen, but she wrote this beautiful card just thanking us for being awesome parents, which you love to hear that. Don't get that too often. And it was just because she wanted to do that for us that day, and we still have it. So again, it's not that she's gone, it's this piece that remains that really, I guess, brings back the pain and the joy, all that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to point out, because one of your followers is saying, they've lost family, but even pets, animals, dogs can sometimes be just as heavy, if not heavier. And even during this time. And that's completely valid, friend. You should never apologize, for mourning the loss of a pet or any animal as well. So the grief journey is the same. So
Absolutely, that's such a great point, because our pets are our family members, even though we generally know that we're going to likely outlive our pets. But still, when it happens, it's horribly painful.
yeah.
And I think also, when you think about grief and the pain of loss, like, that's a to me, that's a pain that has its very own compartment. I think there's nothing like it. You have different feelings. I feel like joy has different levels, different compartments, and you have sadness here and there, but the grief of loss is really, I don't think anything compares to it. I think it's in its own compartment.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that one of the biggest misconceptions, with that, unlike other things that you've just listed, that other other emotions that may cause hurt, you can heal from and actually kind of walk away from. Grief isn't one of those, and it's built for a reason. It's intended to do that, because grief truly becomes part of you, and it changes you forever. But it's not, unfortunately, something that you're going to get to a point and say, "Hey, you know what? I don't need you anymore. I'm going to set you on the side of the road and continue my journey. Thanks for hanging out with me for however long." But
Yeah.
grief's not that way. Grief
No.
changes you. It becomes a new skin. It doesn't mean that you're going to have this cloud over you the rest of your life, because I really believe that grief can change us for the good, and we can become stronger, and we can find a peace. And really, it's just a new way of learning to love the person that we've lost, and to be able to carry them differently, so they walk alongside us differently, just in a very different, complete, um, you know, uh, just a complete new way. So,
That's so true. So true. And the other thing I would suggest to people is to not be afraid to talk. If you know someone who lost someone, like, again, using our experience, because that's my
Yeah.
baseline. I've come across people who either won't mention Elizabeth or our loss,
Yeah.
or they'll whisper it. They'll come up to you quietly, like, because they're so afraid, I think, that they're going to open a wound, and they don't want to do that. They don't want to hurt you by opening the wound. But I can tell you, from my view, it's okay,
Yeah.
and you don't have to whisper it and say, "I'm sorry." Like, you can just say it. "I'm so sorry." And I think people like to hear that. So,
Well, I think people, first of all, we need to realize it. And I think other people need to realize it's completely normal, um, to, to miss someone more when the rest of the world, and this is what's happening right now, the rest of the world, both friends, family, social media, advertising, but the rest of the world is telling you to be cheerful and jolly. And guess what? It's okay to miss somebody more when the rest of the world's yelling that at you. And so sometimes the absolute worst thing that we can do, and what we don't realize is when we are grieving, is that we can feel incredibly isolated, especially this time of year. And you're exactly right, Ed, because people will say, "Oh, I don't even want to bring it up. I don't want to. I don't want to make it worse." Friend, it's already worse. It's not going to get any worse than this.
right.
And I pray that you never feel that, but I welcome you and I'm begging you just to check in with me. And I think if people knew that and they could break that the solitude of grief that sometimes we end up, it's like a glass box, Ed, that we're kind of stuck in, and we're frozen in time, but we can see the rest of the world just kind of moving right by us, and it just keeps moving as it should.
Right.
But for that moment and that time, we're stuck in that glass box. And for somebody to be able to stop and say, "Hey, I'm gonna join you for a little bit and just check in with you," there's really no greater gift at Christmas or any other time.
That's right. That's so true. And it just made me think of another experience I had uh, years ago, probably 30 plus years ago. I had a business, and an elderly couple had come in to the business, and like a month later, the wife came in by herself, and she had told me that her husband passed away unexpectedly. And at the moment, I noticed that she was going through all the things that I guess people have said to her. She said, "Oh, well, he's not suffering. He's in a better place." Like, she was making all these excuses, not excuses, but she was just, I guess, just justifying it in a way, like, that it's okay. And I turned to her and I said, "Yeah, but it still sucks." And she broke down. Like, it's like the gates opened,
She needed that
because
permission. Yeah.
she needed permission to say, "You know
Yeah.
what? It sucks." Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think, that's the other thing I would suggest to people, is to acknowledge that, whether you're on the receiving end of it, or if you're talking to someone, um, don't try and make it better. Don't try and
Yeah.
make it better by saying, "Well, they're in a better place." Yeah, they probably are, but it sucks. It hurts. And I
Yeah.
think that,
They're not with me. Yeah.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So, but again, I know that as humans, we do all these things because we put our guards up. Like, we don't want to hurt you. We don't want to offend you. We want to make you feel better. So if we say something that sounds a little positive, like, maybe we're helping, and sometimes maybe we are, but
Not acknowledging it really is going to just amplify the hurt.
yeah.
It truly is,
But that
especially.
that was one of the it's interesting, because that was one of the most profound moments in my life, and it was such a seemingly nothing moment. But when I said to her, "Yeah, but it still sucks," like,
Yep.
it just, when I saw the
And
reaction and her human it hit me so deep. And I walked away with that lesson of, wow, like that's
isn't it interesting, Ed, that you, I'm assuming that happened years before the loss of your daughter.
But this was 30 years ago or more. Yeah.
But that planted something in you that probably helped you just a little bit when you did lose your daughter or your mother or any loss that you've had. And as long as we're willing to accept things like that and to acknowledge it and to remember it and to, make it part of our core as we move forward, then it's incredibly beneficial to us and to anyone that we come in contact with. Another one of your followers had a question about, which is a common question: do you provide services to friends and families? And if so, does that affect your grieving process? So many years ago, when I was very young and young in the industry, I chose to dress one of my grandmothers. I didn't embalm her, but I chose to dress her. And I walked out, an hour and 15 minutes later out of the preparation lab and said, I will never do that again. It was, not a wise decision, but I thought, this is going to be a gift to my grandmother. No, I did not want to see my grandmother in that state. And I did not want to be involved in that. And what I decided, and I think this is very common in healthcare professionals as well, that if it's somebody that I'm going to need to grieve, I don't want to have anything to do professionally with them, because I need to separate that and draw that line and do what I need to do. So
That makes perfect sense. And another question was if you're seeing, folks seem to be seeing more cremations these days. Is there a change in the industry there that you're seeing?
Cremation's definitely increased. And, nationwide, it's definitely creeping up over 50% now, I think. And in some areas, we have kind of two regions that we serve, and they're about 2 hours apart from each other. And one's more urban, and it's 75, approaching 80% cremation. And the other 2 hours more in a rural area, closer to 60%. But what I am seeing an increase in is people that are choosing cremation, but now they realize they can still have a traditional service first. Doesn't necessarily mean that they can't have a traditional casketed service, fulfill either religious purposes or just the need of the family to see their, deceased loved one, and to do something. So I do see an increase in that. And then we also have an increase in other alternatives to fire cremation now. There's aquamation, which is the breakdown of the remains in a water hydrolysis, alkaline hydrolysis solution. And that gets down to skeletal remains,
Wow.
and which is kind of interesting. And then there's also terramation now, which is full body composting of the remains. It takes about 45 to 60 days. And it's just simply that, composting like you would do on the farm. And, but in a separate, container, specifically, for a deceased person. And then the family actually gets back composted earth in addition to the processed down skeletal remains as well, that they can put in their garden, their farm, memorial forest, or something like that. Yeah, it's actually fascinating. And honestly,
That's
I think
probably the most natural means that there is.
It absolutely is. And I think that, we're going to see a huge increase in that. So it's not just fire cremation we're seeing an increase in, but other alternatives to fire cremation. So.
Wow. And I never think about alternatives. I only know of those two, either burial or cremation. Those are the only two I think of. Now, before we wrap up here shortly, we were talking about how it's coming up with the right words to say when someone experiences a loss. And Doris has a great point, and she's asking if you would touch on some of the words or phrases that are well intended. For instance, call me if you need anything. And historically, nobody's going to call you. Like if you say call me if you need anything, you might mean that, but they're not going to call you. That's people don't do that. So what do you think about that? Or can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's such a great point, Doris. And I often tell people to, try to say something that doesn't give them the option. So rather than saying, hey, I'm going to go to the grocery store. Can I get you anything? I just simply take away as much as you can. Hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Why don't I pick you up, a rotisserie chicken and a bag of salad or something? Or, hey, I have to go into town to run a couple of errands, and I really, would like for you to go with me. What time can I pick you up? And because what it does is it disrupts somebody, and they may actually be taken back from it, but they need that because, they're going to take when somebody's grief, especially in the kind of the acute stage of grief, when they're in crisis, they are going to take the path of least resistance. And that's going to be, I don't want to do anything. I really don't want to be around people, but they need it. And so if you present it to them where they really, I mean, ultimately they can absolutely say no, but if
Right.
you kind of, prompt it to, it's a little harder for them to say no. And it's like, oh, okay. It's, the natural response was, 2 o'clock, I should be around. And you drive up and pick them up and take them. I think presence, being present is far more important than anything that you can say or do. And just, kind of almost forcing that upon them and telling them that you are there. And then the other important thing, and I touched on how important it is for us to do it professionally, but the other important thing that you can do is just listen to them. Grieving people want to be listened to, and they want to retell the story of what happened over and over again, because that's good for their heart. And they just want somebody to listen to what else they're going through in life, because the rest of their life isn't stopping either. And oftentimes many people are focusing on the loss, and they forget that this other person, may be dealing with, trying to get their taxes done, or they're right in the middle of a remodel or something like that. And they want to be listened to about all those things as well.
That's right. So be present, but you can also give me a present. So presents and presents, right?
Presents and presents. Yeah.
People like presents. So, so we talked a little bit about the cremation versus burial, different things there, and I'll tell one more brief story, and this was the loss of a best friend of mine that occurred suddenly, and it was my first experience with sudden loss. I had never been through that before, and I have to say it's the worst. I think I hate to see anybody suffer, but I hate these sudden tragedies that happen. Um, but when he passed away, they went through the whole funeral process, and up to that point, my parents, my grandparents were all cremated, and we had memorial services, and the ashes were buried on our own property, and that's what I grew up with. And I always thought I didn't get why people have a casket, and I saw that as I was ignorant, thinking that's kind of, I don't know whether it's showy or what. But then when my friend died, and I went through that process of the visitation, and then the viewing that they had, and you walked up and seeing him in that casket, like, made it real for me. And then the next day we came back for the service, and then the casket was taken out and it was taken to the cemetery. Like, I really grew to appreciate the process. And to me, that was also part of the grieving process, because had they had a burial like I was used to, just ashes or cremation, I don't know that I would have grieved the same way. But by kind of being forced to go through this process again, seeing him in the casket, which was hard hitting, and then being there when the casket was closed and when it was carried out and then brought to the burial, it really helped me grieve, because it walked you through to the final process. And then I even went to visit his gravesite, which is something I've never really done before. But knowing that his remains were beneath that headstone, I was able to go back, weeks later, and it was comforting in a way that I had not experienced before. So going back to something you said earlier about there's no rules, or as far as you grieve different ways, you have services different ways. But that was again a learning moment for me, to be like, oh, I see why people do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately it's not right for everyone, just as you said, and each family has to make, their own decision. But I will say that a lack of doing anything is generally not setting the family up for success when it comes to, the grief journey, because that's going to be forced upon them. If, no matter what they choose to do to celebrate the life or memorialize, if anything or everything, they're still going to have to move forward and carry this, this grief with them. And, going and visiting the grave and the physicality of seeing a casket lowered or something like that is perfectly, the symbolism, fascinates me. And for people to actually see that and to be able to grasp and acknowledge that, that there was a physical side of the loss is huge. But then it continues. And actually, I just had this conversation with somebody in one of our private lives, a friend of ours that lost a daughter. And she even said, she goes, I can't even go to the cemetery anymore. And I said, you know what? I think actually, and this has been years now, I think that's actually growth, because just as important as it is to your process to be able to go and visit somebody's grave, you very well might reach a point where you don't need to do that as often or at all. And that actually can be a sign of strength. And that symbolism is still there whenever you need to go and visit and honor the person. But as we continue to grow, we focus less on the actual death, which there's no greater symbol than a grave of that, and more on how we carry that person with us, every single day, and not having to go somewhere else.
That's right. Well, listen, Eric, I really want to thank you for joining me tonight. Maybe we'll
It's
have you
been
come
great.
back and do this again sometime. Again, it's a little different than what we normally do, but I do want to say to the folks watching tonight that during this holiday season, regardless of your traditions, regardless of your faith or how you celebrate the holidays, uh, be aware that there are folks out there who uh, are hurting for various reasons. And I think talking with you tonight, Eric, has been helpful to me, and I hope that your words have resonated with folks watching as well. And I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to kind of give you the last word here to see, what you would offer up to folks experience grief during this holiday season.
Um, well, specifically to the holiday, I think I would say this. For those of you that are actually doing, and holiday grief can be, it can be, you just had a death, early in December, and you're having to deal with it, which is just kind of a numbing navigation at that point. But the next year, as you approach this, and even many, many years after. But I think the last thing that I would say is that if you are dreading a holiday, any holiday, but specifically Christmas as we approach it, don't see that as a failure, because it's not. It's perfectly fine to diminish the tradition, set them aside, even change them. But if you're dreading it, don't see it as a failure. It's just your nervous system going into healing mode. And it's just your nervous system remembering what it should.
That's great. Thank you again, Eric.
Thank you. This worked out. Everything happens for a reason. And even a call in the afternoon saying, "Hey, could you do it tonight?" It worked out.
It was last minute for sure. Even though we talked a
worked
while
out,
ago,
yeah,
it came
perfectly.
together.
I don't have any other family home yet, so the house was still quiet, and it was perfect timing. But I wish you and everyone else and peace on your journey, Ed, you and your family and everyone out there. Just an incredible holiday season, and whatever you're navigating, just find peace and give yourself plenty of grace as you go through it.
Thank you. My best to you and your wife and your family as well. We'll talk again soon. Thank you.
All right. You bet. Take care.
Well, thank you, folks, for joining me for this very different live stream. I hope that you found it helpful and somewhat valuable, whether it be for your dealing with your own grief, your own loss, or helping you to navigate through other people's loss, and maybe you can talk to them a little bit differently now, or just be aware of this time of year for folks. So thanks again for being here. I do appreciate it. Again, we're gonna pause the live streams through the holidays. I will see you after the new year, but meanwhile, keep watching the videos. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for being here, and as always, I look forward to seeing you next time.